Elias's hammer rang. It sang with the rhythm of the forge. He was the heart of the city, his craft a dance of fire and steel. Each swing was precise. Each creation held his passion. His wife, Elara, and son, Nico, were his world. Their laughter filled his days with warmth. The market square bustled with life, a symphony of bartering and laughter. Elias watched Nico, his son, a spark of joy in his heart. He saw Elara's gentle smile, a beacon of love in his life. Life was good, it was simple, it was all he ever wanted. A shadow fell upon the city. The once bustling streets, filled with the laughter of children and the chatter of merchants, now lay silent under the oppressive weight of impending doom. The sky, once a brilliant blue, was now a canvas of dark, foreboding clouds, casting an eerie twilight over the medieval city. The air was thick with tension, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable storm to break. Riders approached, their armor glinting with menace. The sound of hooves echoed through the empty streets, a harbinger of the terror to come. These were no ordinary knights. They were the harbingers of destruction, their presence a grim reminder of the power they wielded. Each rider, clad in armor that gleamed like polished silver, moved with a purpose that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to watch from the shadows. The ground seemed to tremble beneath their weight, as if the earth itself feared their approach. Kale, a warlord with eyes like ice, led the charge. His cruelty was legendary. Tales of his brutal conquests had spread far and wide, painting him as a figure of nightmares. His black armor, adorned with the scars of countless battles, seemed to absorb the light, making him appear as a dark specter of death. His gaze, cold and unyielding, could pierce through the bravest of souls, leaving them paralyzed with fear. Kale was not just a man, he was a force of nature, an unstoppable tide of destruction that left nothing but ruin in his wake. Whispers of his ruthlessness preceded him. In every village and town, the mere mention of his name was enough to send shivers down the spines of the inhabitants. Mothers would hush their children with tales of Kale, warning them to behave lest the warlord come for them. The elders spoke in hushed tones, recounting the horrors they had witnessed. The villages burned and the lives shattered. Fear was a constant companion, lurking in every shadow, waiting to pounce at the slightest provocation. Fear choked the once vibrant market. Stalls that once overflowed with goods now stood empty, their owners having fled or hidden away. The colorful banners that once fluttered in the breeze now hung limp and lifeless. The air, once filled with the scents of spices and fresh produce, now reeked of fear and despair. The few townsfolk who dared to venture out moved quickly, their eyes darting nervously, always on the lookout for danger. The market, once the heart of the city, now felt like a ghost town, a stark reminder of the terror that loomed over them. Screams replaced the music of the city. The harmonious sounds of daily life were now drowned out by cries of terror and the clamor of chaos. People ran in every direction, desperate to escape the impending doom. The streets, once orderly and bustling, were now a scene of pandemonium. Children clung to their parents, their faces etched with fear. The elderly, unable to flee, huddled in doorways, praying for mercy. The city, once a beacon of civilization, had descended into a nightmare. Elias rushed towards his family, his heart pounding. Every step felt like an eternity, the distance between him and his loved ones stretching endlessly. His mind raced with thoughts of their safety, the fear of losing them driving him forward. The streets blurred around him as he pushed through the chaos, his only focus on reaching his home. The faces of his wife and child flashed before his eyes, their smiles a stark contrast to the terror that now gripped his heart. He had to get to them, to protect them from the horrors that were unfolding. He found his home in ruins, flames licking at the sky. The once sturdy walls now crumbled under the relentless assault of the fire. The heat was unbearable, the flames a living entity that consumed everything in its path. The sky above was painted with the orange glow of the inferno, a beacon of destruction that could be seen for miles. Elias stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend the devastation before him. His home, the place where he had built a life with his family, was now nothing more than a pile of burning rubble. The air hung heavy with the stench of death. The once clear and crisp air was now thick with smoke and ash, making it difficult to breathe. The landscape, once vibrant and full of life, was now a desolate wasteland. The charred remains of buildings stood like skeletal sentinels, a grim reminder of the destruction that had swept through the town. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional crackle of dying flames and the distant cries of the wounded. It was a scene of utter devastation, a testament to the merciless power of Kale and his forces. His world shattered, leaving only a void of despair. Elias stood amidst the ruins, his heart heavy with grief. The life he had known, the future he had dreamed of, was now gone, reduced to ashes. The weight of his loss pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. He felt a hollowness inside, a void that could never be filled. The memories of happier times, of laughter and love, now seemed like distant echoes, taunting him with their unattainable promise. He was a man broken, his soul laid bare by the cruelty of fate. Amidst the ashes, he found them. His hands trembled as he sifted through the debris, each piece of rubble a painful reminder of what he had lost. The sight of their lifeless bodies brought him to his knees, the reality of his loss hitting him with the force of 1,000 blows. Elara, his beloved wife, and Nico, his precious son, lay still and cold, their lives snuffed out by the merciless flames. The pain was unbearable, a searing agony that tore through his very being. He cradled them in his arms, his tears mingling with the ash and soot that covered their faces. Elara and Nico, lifeless and cold, their faces, once full of life and love, were now pale and still. The warmth that had once radiated from them was gone, replaced by the cold finality of death. Elias could hardly believe that they were truly gone, that he would never again hear their laughter or feel their embrace. The reality of their loss was a crushing weight, a burden that he would carry for the rest of his days. The world seemed to fade around him, leaving only the stark, painful truth of his grief. Rage ignited within him, a fire hotter than any forge. The grief that had threatened to consume him was now replaced by a burning fury. The pain of his loss transformed into a fierce determination, a resolve to seek justice for his family. He would not let their deaths be in vain. The image of Kale, the architect of his suffering, burned in his mind, fueling his desire for vengeance. Elias swore that he would make Kale pay, that he would bring an end to the warlord's reign of terror. The fire within him would not be quenched until justice was served. He sought out Arik, a hermit known for his skill with the blade. Arik, scarred and hardened, saw the fire in Elias's eyes. He agreed to train him, to hone his rage into a weapon. The mountains echoed with the clang of steel. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Elias trained relentlessly, pushing his body and spirit to their limits. Arik taught him more than swordsmanship. He taught him strategy, patience, and the art of war. Elias became a weapon himself, forged in the fires of grief and vengeance. He would have his revenge. He would make Kale pay. His journey led him through villages ravaged by Kale's greed. The once thriving communities now lay in desolation, their homes reduced to rubble and their fields scorched. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and the echoes of past laughter, now replaced by the haunting silence of loss. He saw the same pain, the same despair reflected in the eyes of others. Faces that once bore smiles now carried the weight of sorrow. Children clung to their mothers, their innocent eyes wide with fear and confusion, while the elderly looked on with a resigned acceptance of their fate. A farmer, his hands gnarled from years of toil, spoke of a daughter lost. His voice trembled as he recounted the day she was taken, her laughter silenced forever. The fields he once tended with pride now seemed a cruel reminder of what he had lost. A woman, her face etched with grief, told of a husband taken. Her eyes, once bright with hope, now held a deep, unending sadness. She clutched a piece of his clothing, the last tangible memory of the man she loved, as if holding onto it could somehow bring him back. Each story fueled the fire within him, yet also ignited a flicker of empathy. These weren't faceless victims. They were individuals with dreams, hopes, and families. Their stories intertwined with his own, creating a tapestry of shared suffering and resilience. These were real people, their lives shattered by the same darkness that consumed him. He felt their pain as if it were his own, their cries for justice echoing in his heart. The weight of their collective grief pressed down on him, but it also strengthened his resolve. He saw his own pain mirrored in their eyes, the loss of his family, the destruction of his home, all reflected back at him through their sorrowful gazes. It was a stark reminder that he was not alone in his suffering. The weight of their shared suffering settled upon him. It was a heavy burden, but one he was willing to carry. He knew that their stories, their pain, would drive him forward, giving him the strength to continue his quest. He was no longer alone in his quest. The faces of those he had met, their stories of loss and resilience became his guiding light. He vowed to fight not just for his own vengeance, but for the justice of all who had suffered. Together, their collective strength would challenge the darkness that sought to consume them all. Years of relentless pursuit led him to Kale's stronghold. He infiltrated the fortress, a ghost in the night. He moved with lethal grace, each step bringing him closer to his goal. He found Kale, a shell of his former glory, consumed by paranoia and fear. The man was a shadow, haunted by his own demons. His hand trembled as he raised his sword. This was it, the moment he had trained for, bled for, lived for. But as he looked upon his enemy, he saw not a monster, but a broken man. He hesitated, the weight of his intended act heavy on his soul. The fire of vengeance flickered, replaced by a cold realization. Killing Kale wouldn't bring back Alara or Nico. It would only perpetuate the cycle of violence. He lowered his sword, the metal heavy in his hand. Justice, he realized, wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. "You won't kill me?" Kale rasped, his voice hoarse. "You've earned your revenge." Elias shook his head. "Revenge won't bring back the dead, but justice. Justice demands that you answer for your crimes." He took Kale back to the people he had wronged. The village, once vibrant and full of life, now bore the scars of Kale's actions. The homes were damaged, the fields lay barren, and the people wore expressions of sorrow and distrust. Elias knew that this was the only way for true justice to be served. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making amends and allowing the villagers to decide Kale's fate. He delivered him not to the sword, but to their judgment. The villagers gathered in the center of the village, their voices a mix of anger, pain, and contemplation. They debated fiercely, each person sharing their grievances and their hopes for the future. Some called for harsh punishment, while others spoke of mercy and the possibility of redemption. It was a moment of collective decision-making, a chance for the community to heal together. Their faces, etched with pain, held a glimmer of hope. They would rebuild. They would heal. The process of rebuilding was slow and arduous, but it brought the villagers closer together. They worked side by side, repairing homes, replanting fields, and sharing stories of resilience. The children, once fearful, began to play again, their laughter a sign of the village's gradual return to normalcy. The elders, with their wisdom, guided the younger generation, ensuring that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. Elias knew his journey wasn't over. He had found a sense of purpose in helping the village, but there was still much to be done. The world was vast, and there were many more people in need of protection and guidance. Elias felt a calling to continue his journey, to seek out those who were suffering and offer them the same hope he had found. He was determined to make a difference, one step at a time. He would spend his days protecting the innocent, ensuring no one else suffered as he did. Elias took on the role of a guardian, patrolling the village and its surroundings. He trained the villagers in self-defense, teaching them how to protect themselves and their loved ones. His presence brought a sense of security, and the villagers began to trust him, seeing him as a beacon of hope and strength. Elias knew that his past actions could never be undone, but he could atone for them by dedicating his life to the service of others. He had walked the path of vengeance and emerged on the other side, forever changed. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had also been transformative. Elias had faced his darkest fears and come to terms with his past. He had learned the value of forgiveness, both for himself and for others. The path of vengeance had left him empty, but the path of redemption filled him with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. His heart, once consumed by hate, now held a flicker of hope. The sunrise symbolized a new beginning, a chance to start afresh. Elias felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. The burden of his past was still there, but it was lighter now, overshadowed by the hope of a brighter future. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to face it with courage and determination. He was no longer defined by his loss, but by his choice. He chose redemption. Standing by the gravesite of his loved ones, Elias made a silent vow to honor their memory by living a life of compassion and service. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the choices he had made, and the lessons he had learned. It was a moment of profound clarity, a realization that he had the power to shape his own destiny. He chose a path forged anew. With each step he took, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was filled with possibilities. He was no longer a man driven by anger and revenge, but a man guided by hope and redemption. The journey was far from over, but Elias was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength and resilience to overcome them. The dawn of a new day marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one that he would face with unwavering determination and a heart full of hope.